Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. On this evening's episode, I'm doing another 3-pack theme here. I've got 3 classic legendary death metal bands that fit this theme because I really enjoyed what they did in their early classic years, the heyday of classic death metal. And these bands, for the most part, are still going today, or at least to put out stuff in more modern days. And I have followed and kept up with the bands to some extent, but I don't own any of the physical product past the classic years, but you know, they're all still putting out solid material, or at least did here more recently before disbanding in one of these cases. So we'll get kind of into it here. We're covering ATROCITY from Germany. We're covering SINISTER from the Netherlands, and then we're going to finish it with MORGOTH back to Germany. And if you want to know how classic these some of these death metal bands are, ATROCITY and MORGOTH made it onto this At Death's Door compilation from '90. And this was the environment back in the beginning of death metal. These were the bands that you would find on a compilation. Sepultura, Pestilence, and by the way, Mass Hypnosis and Out of the Body, these are from their '89 releases. Sepultura, Pestilence, Deicide, MORGOTH, Burnt Identity, Sadus, Exhorter, Death, Obituary, Malevolent Creation, Believer, Cerebral Fix, and ATROCITY, Deep in Your Subconscious. And we're going to start with ATROCITY since we're listening to them now. And Deep in Your Subconscious from here is also on Hallucinations, 1990. That's H.R. Geiger artwork here. This band, this album's recorded in '90 in Morrisound Studios with Scott Burns. Very complex, complicated album. Not necessarily catchy, very confusing album, but all these elements and things going on. In fact, my favorite track on here is the one that you never hear mentioned, but it's called Defeated Intellect. It's got a weird breakdown in the middle. It just likes a herky-jerky starts and stops. Life is a Long and Silent River, I knew from this other ancient compilation, if I can find it here. Yeah, Death is Just the Beginning from 1990. Got some old school bands on here like Defecation and the original Incubus, Righteous Pigs, Disharmonic Orchestra, Master, Pungent Stench, Revenant, Benediction. So this is, I think it was released on Nuclear Blast, but I have it on cassette. It's released on something else here, but I have it on cassette with Roadrunner, so I thought it was a Roadrunner release forever, but in looking back, it was actually like a Nuclear Blast album and a Roadrunner album, like a joint effort. But cool history here that they go to Morrisound early on to record this. And it's an excellent debut. It's not what I would call catchy. It might be a tough place to start with the band, but it's got plenty of, plenty of excellent material. Mine even has the Blue Blood EP that they put out in '89 after this, which is really rough. I definitely wouldn't start there either, but I guess it was good enough to get them a deal with Nuclear Blast. But yeah, Fatal Step, Abyss of Addiction, Hold Out to the End, the title track, everything on here is excellent, and they've got that logo. Well, then they switch to, they go from that album, now they're fully on Roadrunner Records, and they put out Todescent soon. When I was a kid, I had it on cassette. It was called Longing for Death, the American version. We're listening to Sky Turned Red. This is one of my all-time top 10, top 5 death metal albums ever. It's got this like mood of Dracula, Carpathian Forest, Transylvania, brooding, Vlad the Impaler, all those types of themes and imagery. It's very I love that band photo. They're covered in mud. I had the cassette as a kid, so I didn't. Finally, I got the CD, and there's a cover of Death's Archangel, which I guess is from one of their demos before Scream Bloody Gore, so that's cool to have on here. The title track to open it is weird. Godless Years, Unspoken Names, Sky Turned Red. The intro that we heard was this take on Wagner. The Wagner piece, Necropolis, A Prison Called Earth. It's an absolutely stunning album. I played in the band Time Ghoul. Jeff Hayden was the mastermind, and his favorite band, his biggest influence or inspiration for Time Ghoul were these two, and especially this one. A lot of like dark modern classical and like stuff like this, because it was just so like brooding. Just had like that brooding atmosphere. And so I was already into the album when I joined the band, and he said it was his favorite. I'm like, oh my god, this is the band for, I'm in the right band at the right time. But yeah, just great album. One of the underrated death metal classics for sure is Todescent Suit by Atrocity. So they take all the complexities here that were weird and they turn it into something like the compositions are more clear here. They still go all over the place, but they're very more mature, and the songs are memorable even for being dark and brooding. So love this album. Then they leave Roadrunner and they go to Massacre Records in '94 and they put out Glut. Looks like a Bram Stoker's Dracula. And a lot of people jumped off the boat here. And I will say this is the last album I bought from them. But as much as people hate it, I will say that while I was disappointed in the musical direction, I still like this album. It's '94. They're getting more gothic. He's doing a little bit more clean vocal, a female vocal here and there, some grooving. But I think the song Trial's strong, misdirected's kind of tongue-in-cheek. In My Veins, I'm in Darkness is the only song with thrashing and blasting. Calling the Rain is the gothic stuff that I think really turned people off back in the day. Moonstruck, Ever and Anon, Into the Maze. But then, more like clean channel, mid-bass like Goddess in Black, and Threnody and Land Beyond the Forest. Those are mellower ones. Anyway, people hate on this album. I don't hate on it. I guess I'm the one person that likes it, but of course I was disappointed when I got this. And I remember when we were all anticipating this in the band, and when Jeff got this CD and listened to it, he was just like sad. He wasn't mad, he was just like really sad. He's like, the band died. I will say after this they put out an album, Willenscraft, in '96, which is kind of like this heaviness-wise. It still retains a little bit of that extreme death metal, but it's definitely getting groovier and industrial in those elements, things like that. This is probably more gothic, and the next one's probably a little bit more industrial. It's okay, but I don't own it, and I wouldn't really go. And then after that, then they're doing cover albums of like new wave songs from the '80s. But between all these goofy albums, they would put out like a death metal album, and now they're working on Occult 1, Occult 2 came out. And those are trying to regain probably this form here. But I don't know how to rank these. I mean, I guess Todescent Suit's my favorite. And I think this is the more classic album, but I like this album. So it's tough I don't want to rank those, but again, this is me enjoying Atrocity just for that early heyday. I've listened to their albums since, but I don't own any of them. I like them, but they just don't have that magic of the first two, especially Todescent Suit. Definitely past the first 3 or 4. It's just the productions are getting different, and you're just losing that raw magic that I love so much of the early stuff. So I think that's everything for as far as Atrocity goes. I think I told you they were on this 1990 comp, so early to the game. This 1990 comp, Nuclear Blast Roadrunner, just tells you that they were basically on both labels in the beginning. They did make it onto At Death's Door 2 with Unspoken Names, which is cool. A couple other bands on this compilation I've never listened to. Sorrow, Skin Chamber, Brujeria is on here. So some cool early compilations there. So there you go. That is covering classic era Atrocity. So we will be right back for our second band of the 3-pack. Okay, and we're back. And as you can hear, we've switched. We've gone from Germany across the border to the Netherlands to talk about Dutch Deathster's Sinister. So you got Sinister here, I've got 2 for 1, or 2 albums on 1 here. Sinister formed in the late 80s. Their first album comes out on Nuclear Blast Records, 92. We're listening to Putrefying Remains from this album at the bottom, Cross the Sticks. Classic album, recorded at Alex Kroll's studio in Germany. So, we just talked about Atrocity, Small World. These guys go over to Germany to record with Alex. Just awesome album. Is it raw? You know, they're not recording with Scott Burns or somebody, but I think this raw production is great. Guitars bite. Mike's vocals are awesome. So this is a classic debut. All these songs are good. Perennial Morning, Epoch of Denial, Corridors to the Abyss, Compulsory Resignation. You learn words when you read some of these titles. Classic debut. Love these guys. So they, in the beginning, at least in the photo, they're a 5-piece. Well, the next album comes out in 93, and now they're a 4-piece. And you've got Diabolical Summoning. And I didn't know this forever until doing the review for this, because I always thought, man, that production is really good for an early Nuclear Blast production. Colin Richardson produced it, or at least he engineered it. He didn't record them in the UK. He went to Germany. They're in the Netherlands, but they go to Germany, and so does Colin Richardson, and he records them in Germany. And Diabolical Summoning has a great recording quality. Tough to compare it to Cross the Sticks. It's still totally Sinister, but they're just, the charm of this album's awesome, and the charm of Diabolical Summoning is awesome. And we're going to hear Leviathan if we go a little bit longer here, and Leviathan's on here. Listen to that bite on that guitar. So this is just all good songs. Sadistic Intent, Magnified Wrath, title track, Sense of Demise, Leviathan, Tribes of the Moon, all that stuff. So these first 2 albums on 1, 20 tracks in total, 20 awesome death metal classic tracks from 92, 93. One produced by Alex Kroll of Atrocity, the other one Colin Richardson. Who knew he would leave the UK to go and record Sinister for Nuclear Blast Records? But he did, so that's pretty awesome. Speaking of 2-on-1, you moved to 95. They went from a 5-piece to a 4-piece to a 3-piece here. Record Hate. You can kind of see Hate over here. This might be my favorite album that they record. Awaiting the Apsu is an incredible composition, incredible song. Embodiment of Chaos is one of the most aggressively fast, thrashing death metal songs. Then they switch gears again, and Art of the Dam is like this awesome, groovier one. So the first 3 tracks just hit you with all of these different types of styles. 18th Century Hellfire, just ruthlessly brutal and aggressive. 2 Megatherion. The last track, The Blood Feast, is like kind of that forgotten last track. It's got all these super teched out tempo change riffs that are really cool. And then in 96, 1 year later, they go back in and do a short, quick EP where they record a song called Bastard Saints. They record that song and Rebel's Dome, which are good, but the production is not exciting. It's very dry, very flat, and not as good as the previous productions, in my opinion. But they decide to re-record Cross the Sticks, the song, and Epoch of Denial from the first album. And I gotta tell you, these versions don't do anything better than the classic original version, so I'm not sure why they bothered to re-record those 2 songs. I mean, I guess they're okay, but if I want to hear those songs, I'm going back to the original album. And then after that, Mike leaves the band, and that's where I kind of go, I'm done at that point, because, man, Mike was the best vocalist. Well, in reviewing for this album, I checked out Aggressive Measures, the album after this. The guy they got to replace it is not him, but he kind of sounds like him, and Bart's still on guitar, so you're still getting, if you like Hate, lots of tempo changes. Leviathan from Diabolical Summoning. Anyway, it's good. Then he leaves. They come out in 2001 with an album called Creative Killings with a gal named Rachel doing vocals. And at that point, I definitely haven't really kept up at all. But they keep putting out albums. I guess every time I get a sampling of it, it still sounds good. It still sounds hyper aggressive. It's still classic Sinister. Just that up-tempo aggression that they're known for. And Abe, the drummer, is still the one guy that's in the band all these years later. So, classic band. Again, I got them to them through this compilation from '92. Sense of Demise is on this 5 years of Nuclear Blast in '93. So they were on some of these earlier. Yeah, just classic, just tempo shifting all over the place. So that's another classic band I had to talk about. I did see them live. I think it was '94. So it was Cannibal Corpse with Cynic and Sinister. And I don't know if Sinister went on first or second, but I felt bad for Cynic because, man, Sinister was ruthless and so were Cannibal Corpse. And Cynic was trying to do their early progressive fusion death thing. Sinister were good. I think they were a four-piece at the time. They were playing on the Diabolical Summoning album, is what they were touring for. So there you go. That is covering another classic death metal band, Sinister, from the Netherlands. So we'll be right back with our third and final band of the night. Okay, and we're back. One more band tonight. We're going back to Germany because we're going to start talking about a band that you can hear right now. We're talking about Morgoth. I don't know who arrived first, Atrocity or Morgoth. I think these guys did because they have an official recording going back to '89. And while the album I have here is actually called Resurrection Absurd, The Eternal Fall, when I was a kid I had a cassette that had it in reverse, so when I bought this I flipped the covers around to the cover I prefer. But they basically did an EP in '89 called Resurrection Absurd, which is just classic late '80s death metal. It sounds like Leprosy from Death or something, but with Mark Brew on vocals. So he's given them kind of their identity, really. And then in 1990, they do The Eternal Fall. We're hearing bits of the Utumno right now, one of my favorites. And this EP from '90 might be my favorite thing Morgoth has done. Because every song, Burned Identity, Female Infanticide, White Galleries, Weird, this song, and Eternal Sanctity. And Mark Brew's voice, very monstrous. So basically, I consider this their debut. It's comprised of two EPs, one from '89, one from '90. By the way, The Eternal Fall was mixed by Scott Burns at More Sound. But just a classic, classic Morgoth, classic pure death metal right here, coming out of Germany. Listen to this riff. Love this one. It's a Kukumno. So then, and these are all on Century Media, by the way. And so in '91, the classic year for death metal, they come out with Cursed, like my shirt. Had it on cassette, still do. A lot of these I had on cassette that I don't know what happened over the years. Classic death metal. If we keep going with her, Soul Baptism, The Body Count, Unreal Imagination, Exit to Temptation. You know, just all kinds of Isolated. You know, just all these classic songs up here. Mark Brew's voice. You can always tell him everybody else is in the darkness and his hair is so blonde. You can't miss it. But classic album, probably their most popular album. They played it live in its entirety. You can get a copy of that, I think. But classic album. I actually like the Eternal Fall stuff even better than the Curse stuff, but this is their classic death metal right here. And then you move forward 2 years. So you're done with the 89, 90, 91 era of the band, and you move to Odium. '93, still on Century Media, but they're changing their sound here. It's still death metal, and it's still fairly classic, but now you're hearing like more mid-paced, more industrial. Like the guitar tone is completely different. But the thrashing is still there, and Mark Gru's still doing his thing, and these songs are still good. So they're changing, and you're kind of like worried. You're like, I always thought like, this is a really cool album, but I'm afraid to hear what they're going to do next. This might be as far as I go, and it's exactly what happened. But Resistance, The Art of Sinking, Submission, Under the Surface, Drowning Sun. My favorite song, one of my favorite songs they did is called Golden Age. It's very weird and atmospheric, but cool, just cool. I liked it so much when they released it again with this alternate cover and a remix or a remaster. I had to get this too. So I'm a huge fan of this album. I don't know how you compare this one to these two. You can compare these two to each other, but this one's kind of its own thing. But man, big fan of that early era of Morgoth. And then I stopped following them mainly because they took 3 years between albums, and you just kind of forget about bands back in the day when they take that much time. And plus, the next time they released an album was 1996, and I've said it many times on the show, but man, that was just the beginning of the dark days for classic death metal bands. So they released an album that I finally listened to in preparation for this episode, called Feel Sorry for the Fanatic, which basically has the same lineup in its own Century Media, but the album cover kind of turns you away. It's not their logo, it's an album cover that's kind of a turn-off. But I listened to the album, and for what it is, it's pretty good. I mean, it's not great, but it's pretty good. Mark can kind of sing. The songs are all mid-paced, a little industrial, or almost like dance beaty at times, but I kind of like it, and I might buy a copy if I can find it for cheap. But I like the song Curiosity, Graceland. It's called Graceland. Forgotten Days. All the songs on there are at least okay, and it's not as cringeworthy or laughable as I thought it was going to be. And so I might buy that. And they also have Greatest Hits, or a compilation, 87 to 97. And if you don't want to buy Feel Sorry for the Fanatic, it does take 3 songs from that album, puts them on there. And then it also gives you their original demo from 88 on there. So if anything else, if you're like me and you only like this classic era of the band, well, you get that compilation, you'll get some highlights from Feel Sorry for the Fanatic and that 88 demo in its entirety. So there's at least that. Then they reform, they disband and reform, and they put out a 2-song EP called God is Evil in 2014. Sounds like Cursed, but it sounds great. Mark Gru sounds great, like he never missed a day. Then they fire him, and they put out Ungod in 2015, which I want to say I like, and it sounds like Cursed, but it doesn't have Mark Gru on vocals, and I'm sorry, but he's kind of your identity. And so he's gone, and you've just got another guy there who's fine, but he's not Mark Gru. And these songs were written for Mark to sing on. And the band at that point is like one original member. And maybe the bass player switched to guitar too, but it's just not the same band. And so Ungod is okay, but you know, if I want to listen to Ungod, I'm just going to listen to these, and or that God is Evil EP, which I need to get. I think it's only on like 7-inch vinyl, but those 2 songs sounded good. I think it just needed Mark on the vocals there, but and then they disbanded. So, but still, just a classic band that again I didn't really keep up with after the classic era, but I did listen to Ungod and God is Evil when they came out more recently, and I did go back for that one industrial groove album they did in the mid-90s. But so there you go. I think that covers it all here. I think Morgoth was on this EP, or on this compilation. They were also on this Century Media compilation, In the Eyes of Death, another good one if you can find it. So there you go. That is covering 3 classic bands, Atrocity, Sinister, and Morgoth. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.